Cool, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for my favorite segment. And today, it is the talk about the removal? Is that the right word for it? I don't think so. The moving on, the sunsetting of Bobby Codec as the CEO of Activision Blizzard. And let's talk a little bit about this. For those who don't know, Bobby Codec's been the CEO of Activision Blizzard for quite some time. So for those who really would like to look at this and say, oh, we hate this guy because of this reason, and this reason. For as much as you can basically say that, you could also look at Bobby Codec and say, well, technically, he's actually responsible for this good thing, and this good thing. For example, a lot of people actually say that he was one of the champions spearheading the original creation of Overwatch in 2016, when a lot of people internal to the company were like, we don't think that Overwatch will work. It's a first-person shooter. We don't make first-person shooters, right? We're known for top-down strategy games. We're known for variations on that formula, so you're talking Warcraft, you're talking Diablo. We're also known for MMOs now because of World of Warcraft, right? We're known for first-person shooters in Call of Duty, the biggest game of almost pretty much every single year. Why on earth would we make a team-based first-person shooter with more cartoony characters similar to, say, Team Fortress? How is that going to work? And the weird part about that, when you really think about it, is that it probably shouldn't have worked. There were other companies that tried the exact same idea. That same year that Overwatch came out in 2016, also Battleborn came out. And that game was a tremendous failure and flop. No one played it. It just came out and it died within a year. It was already offline. Servers were disconnected. So for every time that you have someone who has a crazy idea and says maybe it'll work, there's a ton of companies that try the same thing and it doesn't work, right? So when you look at the situation, Bobby Codec, for the fact that he was the CEO of Activision Blizzard for so long, he must have been doing something right? There's no way that someone would be in charge of a company for that long, making horrendous choices, and would still be in power. For example, take a look at the guy who did the launch of Xbox One, right? I'm trying to remember his name right now. I'm sure a bunch of people are now going to flood the chat with the guy who launched Xbox One, the guy who said, oh, if you don't have an internet connection, we have a console for you. It's the Xbox 360. Oh, we don't want... Oh, Don Matrick. I just remembered his name. Don Matrick, right? This guy was in charge of Xbox for a while. He launches the Xbox One. It tanks, and he's out of there. And it's funny because Microsoft didn't act like they fired him. They absolutely forced him out. And he got his ass tossed out, because then they had to try to recover from that. Bobby Codec doesn't really have a Don Matrick track record. If he did, and he was the CEO for as long as he was, I think everyone would be like, what the hell's going on at this company? How could you leave this guy in charge? You have to understand that under Don Matrick's tenure as the CEO, this company became the #1 company in the world for first-person shooters. Call of Duty became the most prominent first-person shooter ever, and continued to hold that spot against heavy opposition. You had your Battlefields and the Battlefield spin-offs. You had variations of Halo and games like that. You even had the co-op games that, when Battle Royale, right, got humongous. Call of Duty still held its own. And then it implemented its own Battle Royale with Black Ops 4 Blackout, and then later on Warzone, right? So obviously, this guy knew some stuff, Take a look at other games that, admittedly, you would think a game like World of Warcraft, right? That became completely outdated. And there were so many other MMOs that have come out during this last 10 to 15 years. And you would think that World of Warcraft would have faded into obscurity and maybe never been talked about. No! World of Warcraft persists. There's still expansions. The game still has a vibrant community. It's certainly not the biggest community for MMOs, but it still continues to be successful. And as much as you can criticize that Diablo 3 and now Diablo 4 just don't hold a candle to the original two, they still were sales dynamos that sold a ton of copies and made this company a bunch of money, and the expansions continue to roll out and sell, right? So even though you look at this guy negatively and be like, well, what about all the drama shit? The guy's doing the right thing. And you might say, well, I don't really get it, because what about all the negatives, right? Let's focus on the negatives, but then let's overall focus on why he was there for so long. What about all the negatives under Bobby Codec, right? So number one, the entire culture of Activision Blizzard being overworked, underpaid, underutilized, under-rewarded, right? Everyone at the company kind of collectively agrees this guy didn't really value the employees. He basically treated them like a cog in a machine, right? Work your ass off. The whole grind culture, the whole, crunch culture, that was mandatory at Activision Blizzard. These games were always like that, and there was nothing you could really do about it. You just deal with it, or you don't work there, right? Like, that was part of it, right? In addition, all the cultural stuff that apparently happened under him. Apparently, I've used this reference before, and a lot of people don't get it. A lot of people said that Activision Blizzard under Bobby Codec became a good old boys club. What does that mean? It means that there's an upper echelon of people in the company that become untouchable. They're basically it's like almost like a fraternity. They're in charge. They're the ones who are kind of testing everyone under them constantly for loyalty. They'll do whatever they want. They'll treat them however they want. They're untouchable, and don't ever say or do anything negative to them. I mean, take a look at some of the stuff that's been uncovered over this guy's tenure. They were going to gaming conventions, and they would rent a hotel room, and they would have a picture of Bill Cosby in the hotel room and call it the Cosby Room, and make jokes about how Bill Cosby sexually abused women by drugging them, and then make jokes about having women in that room, and there's rumors that exactly happened. They would bring women into the room and essentially have their way with them. Wow, that's something great for a CEO to know about and be involved with, isn't it? There were reports of, people being abused at the company, both emotionally and even sexually. And there's lawsuits. In fact, they just settled a giant lawsuit this last couple of weeks ago that was ongoing for years about mistreatment of employees internally. Now, you don't know the outcome of the details because it's all been sealed. It won't be public record. I mean, I guess maybe at least for a while. I don't know how the law works. But yeah, they settled. They paid a ton, millions and millions of dollars to employees for mistreatment. Do you think they would do that if it was all a lie? Of course not, right? And I mean, just case in point, let's take a look at Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 that just came out a month and a half, 2 months ago. The game is literally Modern Warfare 2 with a skin put over it, and new maps that aren't new maps. They're just throwback maps to the original Modern Warfare 2 from 2009. Minimal effort. It's exactly the same netcode with exactly the same problems. The skill-based matchmaking has the exact same problems. It has all these problems online. The game just isn't very good. Still the best-selling FPS of the year, right? But the game's just not very good. And when you analyze it on paper, how did we get to this point? The answer is simple. Even the devs have admitted it. We were given about a year to a year and a half to make this game. We weren't given a full dev cycle to make this game. We were told to rush it. Even though we knew that it wasn't that good, we were told to pump it out and rush it for profits. We don't want to make a bad game. We're just forced to. Guess who's in charge of those decisions? Bobby Codec. He's the one who is the CEO. He green stamps or red stamps things, and is the one who says yes or no ultimately. So I want you to think about this. If this guy's the CEO, and there's all these reports of awful internal negative, debilitating culture, crunch, that the employees hate their jobs and lives, and they're just forced into these awful situations where there's an untouchable upper echelon of this company that can do nothing wrong so they can abuse the employees. They're having Bill Cosby rooms at conventions. The games are being rushed out and they suck, but it doesn't matter. Like, why would this guy have been in charge for so long? And ultimately, there's only one answer that makes any sense. This, money. Because what's happened is in the last 20 years, Activision Blizzard went from a company that was known as the company that makes great artistic games to the company that makes the games that make the most money. And that's the change that happened under Bobby Codec. Because you might say, well, I don't get it. If they're not making great games, why are they so popular? Marketing, positioning, hype, lack of competition, or at least competent competition. There's a lot of factors involved here. For as much as we can say negatively about Bobby Codec, cannot deny the fact this guy is a shrewd, smart businessman. He knew how to position his company and release products in a way that basically they would be the dominant products in said market. When he released Overwatch, he knew there was going to be competition, but he released it with enough money, marketing, and things put into it that it would always be the prominent Team Fortress 2 spinoff that would be showcased. And all the other ones, like Battleborn and a couple others, no one even knew that existed. They just got swept right under the rug, because when you heard Activision Blizzard was making a game like that, that's all you heard of. So Overwatch becomes dominant and prominent, right? That's Bobby Codec. That's what he was good at. You understand? So for all the awful things that he did internally, as a businessman, this guy actually was a great businessman. And you might say, well, I don't get it, because if there's so many complaints against things going on in the company, how could he remain in power? Weren't there lawsuits out the ass? Yes, there were lawsuits out the ass. That's what they just settled. But the thing is, he stayed in power because of the shareholders. For those who don't know, publicly traded companies have something called shareholders. These are people who actually own the company. In part, you own stock, and the stock is a percentage ownership of said company. So even if all these reports are coming out, the employees are upset, there's too much crunch, there's sexual abuse, the management's untouchable and is very much misbehaving. But if every year your company is making record profits, and those profits are then being given as dividends to the stockholders who own the company, meaning they're getting paid directly for the performance of the company, what motivation would those people who are now getting filthy rich have to change the management of the company? Right? They're making so much money. They don't give a shit. So they ignore all the moral issues within the company and say, as long as this company is printing money for us, we don't give a shit if anyone gets mistreated. And that's exactly what has happened over the last 10 to 15 years at Activision Blizzard. Now, what did it take to have a change in that mentality? Microsoft bought them out. That's literally what it took. Microsoft stepped up with so much money that the stockholders couldn't resist. They were like, wait a minute, you're going to even give us even more money than if Bobby Codec stayed in power? Yes, and then some. We're going to buy you out for so much money that Bobby Codec will be an afterthought. You'll never even care that he was in charge and made you the money he did, because we're going to go over the top to purchase your company, okay? And that's exactly what happened. All these stockholders took a giant payday, essentially, from the Microsoft buyout. So now Microsoft says, we don't want Bobby Codec in charge anymore. We want him out. We're going to put our own people into these positions of power at the company, and we're going to run it how we want to run it, right? And a lot of people are happy about that, right? And so now they can get rid of Bobby Codec. But the thing is, does Bobby Codec now get the axe? Does Bobby Codec does security go to Bobby Codec's office, kick the door in, take these billy clubs, start smashing everything in his office, pick him up by the scruff of his neck, and say, get the fuck out, you piece of shit, and throw him out into the street in the big boxes of papers flittering in the wind? No. Do you know what Bobby Codec gets? A golden parachute. He's received a $200 million payout to leave the company, and on top of that, other benefits. People are actually estimating he might actually get a total of $400 million just to leave Activision Blizzard. What kind of a world do we live in? This guy gets paid so much money. No exaggeration. His annual salary that he was receiving could have paid 1,000 employees under him. Do you think that he really deserved that much money? But again, the stockholders are making so much money, they want him to stay in power, so they keep paying him that much money so that he'll stay there and make them more money. It's just an endless cycle of greed, and the only people getting hurt are the employees and us, the end users of the content, who are like, why is the game not as good anymore? That's why. Because it became all about that endless cycle of greed rather than the quality of the product or the art of the product or whatever you want to say should have been the focus. It wasn't anymore. You see? So now, Bobby Codec is getting, well, he's not getting thrown out. He's just being told leave. And by the way, here's a lot of money to leave. And of course, a lot of people have issue with that. Now, here's the funny part, all right? Officially, as of today, it's the first day that Activision Blizzard is no longer under Bobby Codec's leadership. He's gone. He left yesterday, okay? Normally, when someone like this leaves a company, you would have an outpouring of people from over the years who would basically be coming out and saying, well, here I want to reminisce about my work with Bobby Codec and you know, the good times we had and all the good work he did for the company and stuff like that, like testimonials to the nature of how this guy was a good guy for the company and for everyone else. Literally, journalists are going all around, interviewing people at the company, asking around. Literally, no one has made a positive testimonial about Bobby Codec. Everyone either does this, zip, and says, I have no comment, or says, well, now that he's gone, now I can tell you, actually, here's some of the stuff that's happened over the years. There has been a story that he actually didn't like an employee so much, he threatened to kill them. Now, do I believe that that is true and that he actually was going to murder an employee? No. But can you imagine if you're someone who's working at this company and you're told by your CEO, or you heard through the grapevine that your CEO wishes you were dead? Because I think that's really what it was, is that he wished someone was dead because they were causing him problems. How would that make you feel? Exactly, right? And that's just one example. There's people who basically said that they spoke up against something or whatever, and basically this guy would come down on them for having any kind of a speaking up against what this guy had intended that the company should be doing. Even if what they were saying was backed by facts. Saying, I don't think this will work because you want to do it, but what about this, what about this, what about this? He would just, you know, shove it down. In fact, here's a funny thing, and this is documented. So, you remember last year, we had the release of Overwatch 2. You remember how bad that launch was, that the game did not work at launch. And I continuously tried to play that game for another 2 weeks after launch and literally could never play it. You remember this, correct? Bobby Codec blamed all the negative press about Activision Blizzard on that. He was claiming that the reason that Activision Blizzard had a very bad reputation in the press was because Overwatch 2 had a bad launch. Not because at the same time he was embroiled in multiple controversies, multiple lawsuits. He was, oh, it's not me, it's Overwatch 2. And it's documented. There's internal, he wrote emails, he gave all hands meetings where he said this publicly. That's what our problem is. It's Overwatch 2. It screwed us over. Not him. So to him, he's immune to anything. He didn't do shit, right? It was always just this one game was the scapegoat for all the negativity thrown towards the company. So that's just a couple examples, all right? So overall, the Bobby Codec situation is just kind of representative of what has happened in American corporate America in the last 15 or so years. What's happened is we've had a shift from companies that are a balance of, yes, we're here to make money, but along the way, we have to be sure that we're kind of being morally responsible for everything else that we do. Let's make sure that our employees are taken care of. Let's make sure that the products that we're making are quality so that our customers can enjoy them. Let's make sure that everyone is being treated fairly on both sides of the equation. This is always supposed to be something that happens in corporate America. And what's happened with Activision Blizzard is in the last 15 years under Bobby Codec's watch, all of that moral part just went away. It became strictly what's legal and what's not. So if it's legal, or if we can get away with it because we have so much control over our employees that there's no way that they would possibly speak up and or do anything about what we're doing, let's just keep doing it. Because as long as it makes us money, that's all we care about. And so we had game after game that came out and is underwhelming, despite the fact it has the biggest budget, has the ginormous marketing campaign, and everyone's hyped up to play it. You play it, you're like, why is this game not that good? I don't understand. I just don't get it. This is why. Because this guy was the guy infamous for making the profits, not for putting out the good products. For overworking and mistreating the employees, not for having a happy workforce that then was happy to make the good product. You see? It's terrible. In a lot of ways, you can compare it to, say, like Walmart. Walmart came into American business and systematically destroyed all the companies around it that cared. All those little mom and pop shops, all those little local businesses that were putting out quality products were forgotten as Walmart rolled in with the big marketing campaign, the big smiling face, all the ads, and Walmart proceeded to put out subpar products. But they're cheap, so everyone would run out and buy them. But yet, the employees are mistreated. There's tons of stories of mismanagement and awful things happening. Crime moves into cities as Walmart moves into cities. But that's okay because of money. The company makes tons of money, and that's all that matters, right? So that's essentially what it is you have a company that became all about the profits, not about the products or the well-being of the gaming culture, of gamers who buy the games, of the people who make the games. Bobby Codec didn't give two fucks about any of that as long as the money rolled in. And now, do you think he gives two fucks as he's getting paid $200 to $400 million to leave the company? No, he doesn't care about any of that. He's rolling out for the rest of his life. He doesn't have to do shit. He could literally sit on a lawn chair and never move until he dies. People will bring him shit. He can pay them to do that. You know what I mean? Like, he's got the ultimate fuck you money. And nothing can be done about that. Can you say that he's earned that? I don't know. Can you really say someone earned something by mistreating people? I don't believe that. You know, my philosophy is that in life, if you earn something, but you do it by not hurting people, then you've truly earned it. But if all you did was mistreat all the people around you, do things underhandedly, that's not legit success. That's called, I got it by any means necessary and I crushed everyone around me. That's fucked up in my head. Like, I would never live my life like that. But there's tons of people out there that don't give a shit. And that's what we got to look out for. And that's kind of the textbook case of what Bobby Codec was. Success by any means necessary. Doesn't matter if it's underhanded. Doesn't matter how we do it. As long as the shareholders' pockets are lined and he stays in power and makes the money, who gives two fucks about anything else, right? So you got a decade of bad games or underperforming games. Every once in a while, a little nugget of good stuff thrown in there. But even then, you got, for every Overwatch, you got an Overwatch 2. That's a piece of shit, right? So, it's pretty sad because you will almost never ever see these major companies actually do the right thing. It's like, how do you think a major corporation gets to the point where it is? Probably because they stepped on everybody else, not because they did it the right way. Very rarely. If you happen to work for a company that you get treated fairly, you're lucky. You have to understand that. I've been through this in the many different jobs that I've held, and I've been in retail, I've been in fast food, I've worked for a bank, I worked for a helicopter company. There hasn't been a single company in my life that actually treated me well. Or they would pretend like they were, and the next thing you know, when it benefits them, treat you like shit, or even toss you right out the door. That's corporate America. That's not how society's supposed to be. But that seems to be how things have become. So it's funny, because today people are rejoicing that Bobby Codec is going out the door. But are you sure, really, that now that Xbox owns Activision Blizzard, that things will be any better? Because it could go two different ways. Actually, let me put it this way. It could go three ways. Number one, nothing whatsoever could happen at all. Meaning, someone new comes in and it's just business as usual. Everyone keeps being crunched and mistreated. Culture doesn't change. It's same old at Activision Blizzard. New name, new face, same day, no difference. That could be option number one. Okay? Option number two could be Microsoft comes in, takes control of the situation, assesses as a business what's wrong with Activision Blizzard, does continuous improvement analysis, and say, here's all our problems. Here, and here, we've had all these big problems with things that need to be fixed or improved. This is really what the problem was that Bobby didn't care about because the money kept rolling in. But if we improve this, and this, now we've got work-life balance for our employees. We can now make better products. We can focus in on the products that are going to work. We can have budget to actually expand into new things rather than just pumping out the same old shit every year with Call of Duty. Let's do this. Let's diversify. Let's do the right thing. That could happen. And if that happens, great. Or, sadly, if you want my true opinion, there's option 3. And I think, sadly, what we're going to see is option 3. Because this has already happened with other companies that Microsoft has bought out. It's called the hands-off approach. Okay? It's called, we buy the company, we supposedly put people in power of the company, but then what ends up happening is, they don't really do much at all, right? Like, for example, earlier this year, you had the same company that's made Deathloop and Dishonored and other games in the past that were outstanding put out Redfall. Okay? Redfall was literally released to be an unfinished dog shit mess. That game was not functional at launch. I watched my wife play it. There were vampires floating in the sky, and as you walked by, an invisible box would release the vampire and drop it down to the street, and it would go T-pose. And then you would walk by, and it would watch you like this, and then all of a sudden it would launch. It's like, what the fuck? What is this game? How did you release it? And then when they interviewed Phil Spencer about it, he goes, maybe we should have paid a little bit more attention to that game in its development cycle and been a little bit more hands-on. Essentially what he's saying is he didn't touch it at all. All they did was they told them they wanted it by a date, and that was it. They never actually followed up. They never checked to see if it was any good. They never actually made sure that the game was playable and or would want to be played by anyone. They just said, just release it by this date, and as long as you do, you're good. And they did, and it was broken and junky mess. What's funny is people who play it today actually say the game's not that bad. Like, if you play it today, apparently it's a very passable co-op looter-shooter style game fighting vampires. The problem is no one cares about Redfall in December 2023. They cared about it back in, what was it, February, March when it released? That's when they wanted to play it because that was the release date. And first impressions are everything. So it doesn't matter if it's on Game Pass. It doesn't matter, doesn't matter what else. As long as that game was a piece of shit at launch, forever in people's minds, it will be a golden turd. No matter how much you shine it up and it looks better later, that's going to be what people think of it, It's very rare in this day and age when games get a second chance, like a Rainbow Six Siege or a No Man's Sky. Those are almost like the Cinderella stories, right? The game that was the underdog that sucked ass at launch and all of a sudden it comes back later. So, to me, all right, when I look at a situation like what's going on with Activision Blizzard, and I hear that Microsoft bought them out and people are rejoicing because Bobby Codec's gone, this doesn't mean that this is like, oh my God, here comes the magical rainbows and the golden roads into Oz or anything like that. To me, it's like, we got work to do, right? Now you've got to get this company back into a way that makes sense, into a thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like, sadly, this is the beginning of a long process to build this company back to something great. And it's hilarious because I'm saying that about a company that always has the best-selling game of the year in Call of Duty, right? But they still need to build themselves back because they've become the company that pumps out half-finished junk or regurgitated crap for profit under Bobby Codec. Now Microsoft has to mold that into a game or a company that's going to make great games again, right? Again, they had a gold mine with Overwatch. They ran into the ground in Overwatch 2, like they ruined it. And that's Bobby Codec. That's the Codec effect. So what's next for that company? I don't know. But I'm not rejoicing that Codec's gone like a lot of other people. I'm saying, all right, that's positive step 1. Now let's see step 2 through 10 to continue this process. Now, we've got them out. Okay, guys, go to work. And everyone's like, huh? What do we do? And then they just make more subpar games, I certainly hope that that's not the case, and I certainly hope that things will get better at Activision Blizzard. But I wanted to analyze this from a more big perspective because so many people today are just analyzing it from a way of, this guy is a villain, right? We're glad he's out. Yeah, but why was he in power for so long, and why did no one out him until now? This is why. Because he was making so much money, and this is how corporate America works. It's based on money, not on what's right, not on what's good, not on what's best for everyone, but what's best for a very small few who financially benefit. That's corporate America. It's pretty fucked up. And almost our entire country is dictated by this. These companies lobby to our politicians and pay them money to feel a certain way or campaign a certain way for the laws that would benefit them. And then our politicians make laws to help these giant companies. How the fuck does that work? That's our government. And now we're getting into politics, but I knew we would because that's really where the core of all this goes. Is we have a broken system in the United States, and that's how Activision Blizzard is how it is. So, anyway, that's enough of that because I'm not going to dabble too far into politics today. But that is the Bobby Codec situation. All right, he's gone. Will he do something else? Probably. By the way, he sits on boards of other companies. So even though he's not the CEO of Activision Blizzard, he still has influence over the gaming industry and other tech industry as well. So don't think this is the end of him or